Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat. Lorin, I want to jump into this because this is something you and I get a lot these days, and I will say I see it all over social media. It generates a lot of emails over to me, and that is the processes by which pet food is made. What's the best? What's the hottest? What's the this? What's the that? People are constantly coming at, and when I ask them what their understanding of any of it is, they really don't have a good idea. So whether it's extrusion, whether it's baking, whether it's air dried, whether it's freeze dried, all of these things seem to sound good to them without them having any real knowledge. How did you approach that when you were in your store today as you're advising different, folks within the industry? What do you feel is that key starting point for the pet stores, the pet parents? I mean, there's a lot to really know and understand
Yeah.
across the board, but I see it thrown around so much.
Yeah, there's a lot. So I'll just be really brief on each of these. Kibble. Um, Extruded versus baked. Is one necessarily better? Depends. Temperature matters, how long matters, the quality of the ingredients, the grading, all of that kind of stuff. I don't consider baked to be necessarily better than extruded. It's just a different form. Um, and it depends on the company and their philosophy. You go up from there to air dried and freeze dried. A lot of people don't know what the difference is between the two of those. And the way I used to simplify it in my store for people was freeze dried, you could typically reconstitute with water. That's basically what's happened. The water's been sucked out of it. You add water, you soak it in water, it's going to reconstitute to a good percentage of what it was. It has better nutrients. Um, Things weren't cooked out of it. Um, Air dried. People think air dried uses no heat. I used to get into this with every single air dried manufacturer out there because my question would be, so what was the temperature of the uh, air that the food was dried in? Oh, I don't know. I'll have to find that out. Okay, find out. And I need to know for how long was it in that temperature? And then were there other temperatures to be considered, like sort of a pre maximum to a post maximum, how long were they in that air? Because all of that affects that. Air dried, you could add all the water you want, you will not reconstitute it. There isn't any of that there to reconstitute. And then you have the raw and gently cooked. Um, Lots of things going on with raw. Raw used to mean raw. Raw doesn't mean raw anymore. Raw can be raw. It can be HPP'd, high pressure pasteurization. It can be bacteriophaged. It can have things added to it. There's a company out there that is extremely protective over the process they use, and they won't tell anybody. I hate that. I hate a lack of transparency. And their somewhat aggro response when asked was, why should we tell everybody what we do and have our process that we've discovered, not proprietary anymore and other people could do it? And I was like, because consumers want to know what the process is for the food. Yeah, that's not enough. Like, oh, okay, good to know. You're the company, you don't have to, but then in my store, I don't necessarily have to carry you or buy you as a consumer. So I'm not a fan of anything less than transparent in foods, but keep in mind, there's not transparency in food, ours or anybody else's pet food, whatever. You have no expectation of transparency. You have to really dial in the specifics of the questions you ask. I was really good at that when I had my store, of really getting to things that they had not been asked before, or didn't think was something that they needed to have answers for. Um, and then it's always interesting to see the artistic, creative way that they come back with the non-answer answer. 3 or 4 emails later, you might get to where you need to be. So, there's a lot of things that are surfacely understood, but not in depth understood. Same thing with gently cooked. What temperature is it cooked at? All of these, what's the percentage of meat? Actual meat, not your protein, not what it says, compared to every other ingredient in the bag, what percentage of the ingredients is meat? That is not the same thing as the guaranteed analysis on the back. I want to know how much of it is meat. So, is it for a lot of gently cooked, is it 40%, 30%, 60%? Because that range is out there, less and more. And you need to know that. You want to be sure you understand that because if you're dealing with an animal that has sensitivities or any type of issues, all of those things carry weight. And plus, you're feeding a facultative carnivore in dogs and carnivores in cats. So all of that applies. One of the things that gets left out all the time is canned food, because people, for some reason, don't consider that processed, and it's incredibly highly processed. Canned foods are cooked in the can, and they're also cooked for a period of time, with certain temperatures achieved. I want to know what those are, at what temperature and how long, and how long did it take you to arrive at that temperature? How long for the cooling process? And for the most part, I gotta say, most companies were pretty good once they got over their, oh, nobody's asked us that, at getting the answers back, as a consumer. And nowadays, with everything being so protective and competitive, I think it's harder to get those answers. I would champion a brand that gave those answers. If they don't fit for what you need, that's not a bad thing. They were transparent. Just don't move on to what does fit for you. But it's very difficult to understand all of the methodologies in creating food for animals out there.
Yeah, I think you that was great. You really hit a lot of different points on that. The way that I often will keep it just simple for folks is, extrusion and baking going to be the higher temperatures. Air drying, going to be lower on the scale, so a better chance at keeping the nutrients. Freeze drying, which is mine, and those who have known me for a while know I actually own a home freeze dryer because I believe in it so much, but I have a few other methods that I believe in even more, which Laura and I will talk about in a different episode. But um, it also starts with the ingredients themselves. So I like that you called that out. It's like it's not just the temperatures, it's what ingredients, I mean, if you start off with poor ingredients, doesn't matter how much or what you did to it, it's still gonna the end result is a
Right.
poor nutrient outcome. And so but it is interesting because I seem to be having this conversation a lot more than I ever have. And I know it's because you can't get on any social media without saying, this is the best, that's the best, this person's got this, that celebrity endorses that, and all the different folks. Um, so to make it simple for everybody, because I get asked this question all the time, I'm going to ask you it because I want to see what your answer is. But I get asked, "Hey Rob, what's the best pet food?" And I always say, the best pet food is the food that your pet does best on. I cannot tell you based on just one question an answer to that because there are so many variables, so many factors. And what are you trying to accomplish? Because there are different diets for different, you know, modalities and what you're trying to do with that particular pet, as opposed to, well, hey, I can have two from the same, family. One might thrive on this type of food, another might thrive on this type, and it's so much goes into it. But at the end of the day, when we get back to how it's being processed, and I love that you called out everything's being processed if it's being bought from a store. There are just regulations that require that. And if you don't think that's the case, I know we'll get some emails on this, and I'm glad Lauren will be reading them. I won't.
I will.
Because I know there is no other way around it. And for all you collectives out there, you can pause right there. You're still doing things, otherwise, you couldn't have it in there. So, that being said, um, I look at it from the standpoint of what's your tolerance, what's your convenience level. And then let me just ask you, would you, do this for yourself on a regular basis? It's the easiest, but it's not necessarily the healthiest. And so these are trade-offs. And when you look at, extrusion, which is by far the most common, well, it's the easiest, it's simplest. It's the, go to grab it almost any store. Heck, you can get that at like hardware and convenience stores these days. It's so
Yeah.
great. Um, there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason. Um, And so when I look at that, I love your candy bar analogy. If I can buy a candy bar and pet food at the same end cap, I probably am, not getting the healthiest thing, right? Um, so extrusion to me is just a very, uh, it's a tough process. I mean, it just really degrades what you're starting with. So that's where going back to one of our other episodes that we did, understanding the different grades of food is important, not because it's going to have a big enough difference, but it does have some difference. But when you're hitting something with 350, 400-degree heat for a long period of time, you're cooking the nutrients out of that. You're cooking the benefits out of that. And you're making the choice that's going to be convenient, which is why I love, you said multiple times, you've got to get some fresh things in there. And, fresh things.
Meat,
Yeah.
meat,
Yeah.
meat.
Yeah. I think that far too often we're lulled into, oh my gosh, and we've seen this was a big trend a while back. I don't know if it's still a big trend, only because I never bought it. Was the like, oh yeah, we've got the extruded with some freeze dried toppings thrown on top of it.
Oh yeah,
Is
it's still a thing.
it still a thing? So in the bags, and I would just be like, there are so many reasons I don't like this. Yet, if I was using, kibble for any of the pets that I'm around, I would certainly be breaking into my freeze dried stash, going, okay, I'm going to throw this on top. But my process for freeze dried and how I store it and how I keep it, not wrapped in a bag of kibble, which has so many other issues in that, and I won't take us too far afoul here, but that's why it's so important to understand it's all a holistic chain, not holistic in the organic and all the rest of that. When I refer to holistic, I often refer to it's that whole circle of everything.
Whole
And
body.
yeah, in the and just even in the intention. How are you storing it? How are you this? How are you that? Because most people, when you say, why are you doing kibble? Extruded foods. Well, it's convenient, it's shelf stable. I've got a busy lifestyle. It's always there.
It's
Hey,
affordable.
yeah, hey, I get it. For what it's worth, and I'll own it. I have a bag of kibble always available because I'm on the road quite a bit. I don't expect in a worst case situation that I'm going to be able to call someone and have them go over and prepare a meal for Bella the way I prepare a meal. That's not realistic. So I have a contingency and I have other things. Now, to be blunt, I'll leave, prepared meals just like I do for the kids and the wife. It's, hey, here's Bella's prepared meal. Make sure it goes. And I'm fortunate, my youngest, very in tune with the pet world. So she takes an effort in that. But prior to that, I get it, folks. What's convenient, what's contingency, things of that nature. But that's also how I got into freeze drying. And once you start to experiment with some of these things and see the values of it, it's really interesting because it's no different. People ask me about treats all the time, and I've been a part of companies that have treats. Treats get extruded too, folks. Treats get baked and extruded to get in the highest heats. But what really blows my mind is when I see how much people will buy jerky, and jerky is one of the easiest things for folks to do at home. Whether you have a dehydrator or not. If you've just got an oven, you can dehydrate or air dry, your food. Um, and it's so funny because folks will tell me, I'm really, crushed financially. What can I do? And one of the first things I pivot to is, do you give jerky and air dried treats and whatnot to your pets? Oh yeah, no, because it's pure protein. I love that. And I'll just be like, okay, I get that, but have you ever just like looked at the store? How much is, a pound of chicken, beef, etc., versus what you're getting in that bag? You could buy 3 pounds quite often for what you're getting in that bag at the same price. And oh yeah, it's 6 to 10 ounces. Saves you a little bit of time, but oh my gosh, what I get from doing it myself, tremendously better. So that's the other part of this that I just wanted to call out to everybody is nobody's going to go extrude. Some of us might bake foods. There's been things that I have baked. There are things that I certainly air dry, dehydrate, freeze dry on a regular basis. There's other methods you and I both like as well, but we'll save that for a different episode. But it should not. It's a part of what you've got to factor in. I see far too many people getting caught up in the hype of, the process that it's being done is the best. And I see these arguments and I don't even engage because it's like, you're all wrong. And I'm going to just throw in more, fuel for the fire where we're not going to get to an answer. Take it back 5 steps. What did you start with? Then the process you chose. Why did you choose that? There are certain proteins that I might choose a different method of how I would have it prepared. Not extruded, baked, not really. But yeah, so I, I think the hype that's out there right now is everybody's trying to do better, and because we're all trying to do better, we have that FOMO of, oh my gosh, this is the new and the best method, it looks like, because we're seeing it from 10 different brands. And that's just one of those things that should not be a part of the decision making process.
So I want to go back to a couple of things you mentioned. I don't have a problem with freeze dried on kibble. I have a problem with freeze dried in kibble bags
Yes,
because of the oxidation that inevitably comes and
all of it.
the rancidity of the fat that inevitably comes, all of that. But if you're going to add freeze dried on top of the kibble right before you serve it, or a little bit of water, make a little bit of gravy, that is at least is a bump. It's an improvement. The other thing too, what do I think is the best food for pets? Similar to your answer, except that people get stuck in this loop of this is what the kids have been eating all these years. Shouldn't be any different later. Well, I don't eat now what I ate when I was, 20, and I'm sure when I'm 80, it'll be something different. You know what I mean? So you have to
Yeah,
understand that it isn't about one food or one type of food. To your point, what does your kid do best on? Sometimes you got to try things. Sometimes your kid may do best on this form of food, but not that recipe, not that
yes,
particular brand's sourcing. They no longer tolerate that because of their age. They can no longer tolerate red meat because they're older. Whatever it is, you have to be able to be flexible to understand nothing alive should have the same diet over and over and over unless they're catching it on the fly out in the field, and even
yeah.
that's not the
I
same
love that
diet.
you called it out. What you said too earlier, what you ate at 20 is not what you'll be eating at, I think, what you're coming up on 23. So, that diet range changes. You're not eating the same thing, no matter what your age is, every single day. Even my teenagers who love pizza and probably would argue with me that they couldn't eat it every day, um, rotating, having different things within. You and I talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
And it really is an indicator too of your pets know. You ever see your pet out there in the grass? chewing on different, flowers, herbs, and weeds. That's why their system will tell them what they need to migrate to. That's instinct. I don't think we have, as humans, I think we've lost that instinct. So, really important to also be observant. I love that you call that out because rotating and mixing in new things, so important, so important for
And
them.
being observant, being aware that, just because your kid's eaten that for the last 8 years doesn't
Yeah,
mean that your kid can continue to eat that. And also let's call out the fact that companies change. Their sourcing changes, their recipes change, their ingredients change, their cooking times change, their co-packers change,
right.
and for everybody who doesn't think about this, no, let me change that. 99% of brands don't make their own food. They go to a co-packer, which is a factory that makes foods for brands. And because who can afford, their own factory, especially, most
Well,
pet foods.
I'm glad you called that out because one of the other things, and I know my freeze dryer friends will reach out to me going, "Hey, you should have called this out." So save the email to Lauren. There's this other notion out there. Well, if that was so good, XYZ company would be all over it because they're the biggest or they're the leading or they're the top brand or blah blah blah. Keep in mind, and I love that you just called this out, there are there is such a shortage of production time available for the better methods of preparing foods that I think folks would be surprised. I
Right.
would argue there are a lot of companies that would love to be doing more in the lower temperature range, but those co-packers that you and I reference, there are just not production times available to do those types of things. And I can speak to it in the freeze dryer world in particular, because
Yeah.
there are many things that I've been approached about being a part of in that space. I love that space. I'm a big advocate for it, but I am honest with everybody that approaches me. There is a shortage of available co-packing time to produce those products. So you've got to build that in as a company and you start to look and go, is that there? Is it not? So that's why the hype on things bothers me sometimes because I don't think it's enough of an indicator these days. We just saw a big company get into, something fresh and raw. And I was like, uh,
Yeah.
that's not, you know,
After they bashed it for years and years.
right,
Yes.
right. But I saw all the raw people taking, victory laps going, see, this proves it. And I was like, wait. That didn't prove it. That just shows they're a smart company
Yeah. Good
because,
business.
yeah, they're a business. And so, so don't buy into the hype. There is a lot to think about. This is just another level of what you should be considering.
And to your point about production times, take it out of the realm of something quality like the freeze drying and things like that, which has an even less available amount of time. But I know as a retailer some years ago, we ran a serious shortage of canned foods because a
Yes.
big box store who is a warehouse store that produces their own private label food, well, they don't produce it. They pay to have it produced.
Right.
Um, Decided that they were going to pay this much more, and their contracts were really steep. The co-packers that agreed to it had to have 24-hour crews. I mean, they had 3 shifts a day running 24 hours a day because the penalty to not meet the agreement was so steep. So all these other brands normally signed up with these co-packers, they were out. There was a huge glut in
Yeah.
a lot of those brands because of the commitment for that mega buyer. And it's the same thing, So you're at the mercy of so many variables as a consumer that are never brought to your attention, that you're never made aware of that, this is about money, people. This is all about money. Our food, their food, all of it. So take it on yourself to pay attention to your animal's responses and to do better. And doing better is bumping the meals, doing better with what you add to it, add whole, add fresh, add better, 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 better. no matter where you're at. If you're feeding the worst kibble there is, okay, please don't. But if you are, if you're feeding the worst thing on the market, which is subjective, then you could improve it tremendously by adding some chicken breasts, some blueberries, some fresh vegetables along with some meat right to it. And you've exponentially made this so much better.
Yeah, and it's very easy. That's, I think, the heartbreaking part
Yeah.
of it. It does not take a lot of effort. You've already got it in your fridge, you've got it in your cabinets. There are things that can elevate very quickly. So, on that little buzzer sound there, this is good timing. What I'll say is, folks, we get it. It's not easy. You got a lot going on in your lives. Have grace for yourself. You're doing the best that you can. We're just trying to raise that knowledge so that you have a little bit better understanding as you're making those choices. Again, we've been there. We want to continue on this journey with you. If you've got some thoughts, you've got some ways that you handle it, share it with us. Practicalpetchat@gmail.com. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. Give your pets belly rubs and hugs from us this week. Thanks for joining us here on Practical Pet Chat.
Bye, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.